All right, so what's up, guys? Eli the Ninja here, back with another video. This is going to be a bit different. This is not going to be the Halo-related video. Don't worry, I am still working on more Halo videos as we speak. But this was just to highlight one of my other passions, which is poker. I do play a lot of online poker and live poker here in Austin, Texas. And I have been playing for about 15 years. I've studied the game inside and out, and last night I went on a bit of a run. I actually finished essentially first place in this online tournament that had 1,570 players in it. It's just an $11 buy-in, so nothing crazy. But first place was originally $2,200. We did ultimately make a deal, as you'll see at the end. But this is just going to be a video kind of going through my run and explaining my thought process in each hand. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. I have cut apart all the different hands that I was dealt and played, and we'll just kind of talk through each one as we go. So to start off, this is the first hand that I started recording. At this point in the tournament, we're actually down to 37 players. I have 23 big blinds, and the blinds are 8,000 and 16,000. So in this tournament, basically everyone started with 10,000 in chips, and you play until one person has all the chips. About top 10% of the field make a profit, and the longer you last, the more money you make. So this is well deep into the tournament. I've already been playing for probably 4 or 5 hours at this point and worked up a decent stack. So this is where we're going to start off. So here I had the 3-5 of diamonds. We just fold this one. We can definitely skip ahead here. Jack 9 also going to fold. I decided to show this as well. So this was this player got put all in, and he folds and shows ace 10. He had 2 pair, which, you know, if you're in that spot, you probably should just call the all in. I just think it's, you know, your hand is going to be good so often, you might as well play for it. When he folds, that tells me that he's a very timid opponent, so I'm going to take note of that and maybe take advantage of him in the future. We're still not being dealt any playable hands yet. Fold the queen deuce here. I'm going to also fold the 7-8 under the gun. Queen 5. We're in the big blind, so we might have to play this hand here. All right, so a player does make the minimum raise, so from 1 big blind to 2 big blinds. It's folded to us, and I believe I do end up playing this hand. So I call for the additional big blinds. And my thought here is, like, I don't expect my hand to be better than his, but it only costs 1 blind to win 4.25 blinds, so that's a ratio better than 4 to 1. I don't need that. I don't need to win the pot very often to make this profitable. If I catch a piece of the flop, I can win it right now. As it stands, I don't hit the flop, but our opponent checks behind. So that tells me he probably doesn't have much of anything. So I do elect for a bet here. I think I make it, 1.8 big blinds. He's already short, so this amount, you know, does put a lot of pressure on him. He has to assume that if he calls this bet, I might bet again on the river. So he does fold, and we take this one down with queen high. So nice little pickup here. Next hand, we're dealt king 9 of clubs in the small blind. This is obviously much better hand than the last one. We're suited. We can make a straight if a 10, jack, and queen come on the board. So there is some connectivity here, but it's very hard to make that straight. So we're not exactly counting on it, but the fact that it's possible does increase our odds of winning with this particular hand. Fold it around to the button here. He also folds. So in this position, you can play it a few different ways. You can just call, you can raise. I think, I ultimately decided to just call and see if this guy will let me see the flop. He does oblige and check. We flop second pair with the 9. So a lot of the time we will have the best hand here, as long as they don't have a jack. So I do bet 1.2 blinds. It looks like I switched to the other view here. Now the turn 10 is not very good for us. Now any 8 makes us straight. 10 or jack paired would also beat our hand. I decided to check here and just see what he does. If he checks behind, we're happy. When he bets nearly the size of the pot, it's a pretty easy fold. So we'll just move on to the next hand. As it stands, we're in 18th of 35 remaining players. Actually 33. Looks like 2 people were just eliminated. And here we have the ace 10 offsuit. And this hand is certainly good enough to come in for a raise, especially on the button. The button is the best position at the table because you'll be last to act for every street after the flop, which means our opponents will have to make decisions before we have to make a decision. Small blind does call on the big blind now. Now everybody's kind of taking their time with their decisions. I mean, we're very deep into the tournament. Everyone's already outlasted over 1,500 players. So I don't blame anyone for taking their time with their decisions. You know, the pay jumps are pretty extreme. Right now, if we were to lose, we would get $65, but if you win the whole thing, you get over $2,000. Both of my opponents checked to me here, so I think that continuing for a bet is fine. We bet on the smaller side because I think if they don't have a king or 7 in their hand or a pair, it's very easy for them to just fold and we win the pot right now. Our opponent does call, which concerns me. I think he might have a king that he's slow playing or a 7. Then the queen hits as well, so I mean, we're not too worried about them having a queen in their hands, although it is possible. They check again, and at this point I decide to check back. There's a chance my hand is still good, and I want to give myself a chance to hit an ace or a 10 on the river. It turns into another queen. This is kind of an interesting spot, so our opponent decides to check. Now if he did have a 7, we actually beat his hand because we have kings and queens with an ace kicker. And if he just has like any pair below the queens, then our ace kicker is actually going to win us the hand. So any lower pairs were counterfeited. So we decided to check back. It turns out he did have pocket 8s. So we got lucky there to counterfeit him on the river. Next hand, we pick up the king 8. Someone shoves all in. We are certainly folding this hand. Nine, 4. Another fold. In poker, like, you want to have a strategy where you're not playing a lot of these junky hands. You know, you're not going to find much value for playing them. So with my strategy, sometimes I'll play worse hands in certain situations, as you'll see later in the tournament, but most of the time we're just going to fold. Okay, so the king queen, I think this is certainly good enough to at least come in for a minimum raise. We do make it 44,000 to go. Ideally, we just pick up the blinds here, but because we're raising from early position, we're usually given a bit more credit. Plus, we block a lot of good hands. Since we have a king and a queen in our hands, we know that, you know, it's less likely for someone to have an ace queen or ace king type hand. All right, so the short stack at the table does shove all in. It now costs us 6 blinds to win 13, which is roughly better than 2-to-1 odds. With exactly 2-to-1, we only need 33% chance to win. And king queen is a coin flip against any pair lower than a queen. And even if we're up against a hand like ace jack, ace 10, ace 9, we actually have better than 33% here. So I think this is a clear call. We don't love it. There's sometimes we will be dominated by hands like ace king and ace queen, but we're gonna have enough odds to make this call more often than not. I do call. He shows up with the ace jack. Like I said, we do have better than 33%, so I'm happy to see his hand. And we hit the king, so we end up hitting another king, making a full house on the river, and we knock this opponent out. So that's fantastic. Very next hand, we're given the pocket 9s. Any pocket pair, for the most part, is good here. I might actually fold like 4s, 3s, or deuces, but 9s is a very strong opening hand, so we'll go ahead and raise this one up. Depending on what type of action we see, will determine how we proceed with this hand. Okay, and I think everyone does just fold here. Don't think we see a flop. Okay, so our opponent did fold as well. All right, so now we're chipping up quite nicely. We've improved to now 6th out of the remaining 30 players, which is fantastic. And our friend in the small blind gives us a walk, so we win the pot without even having to try at all, which is always nice. We're dealt the 4-3 in the small blind, very likely to fold this hand. And yes, we will be folding this. Go ahead and skip ahead. We do fold the 7 deuce as well. Looks like we fold the king 5, the jack 9. So a bit of folding here, and then we pick up pocket queens, so we can play it from here. So this is a hand that I am more than willing to get my entire stack invested. A lot of players might go all in with pairs smaller than this, or ace king or ace queen. Worst case scenario is a higher pair of aces or kings, but that's very unlikely. So very happily raise this one up. Everyone folds. That's all right too. We're up to 800,000 at this point, with the average stack at 541,000. Just to remind you, we only started with 10,000 chips. So we have made quite a few since then. Our small blind opponent gives us another walk, which is amazing. If the guy on your right is very passive, it makes playing a lot easier. Playing from the big blind is sometimes difficult, but my table appears to be very passive. I'm taking note of that here. And I might take advantage of them actually in this hand. So I have an ace 6. This is really not a great hand to see, you know, all 5 cards and play post flop with. But I have an ace in my hand, so I'm thinking that I could make a play at this. And when I see a raise from late position and a call, let's really break this one down. So he calls. All right, so at this stage in the hand, I mean, this guy could be making this raise with all kinds of hands. I mean, he's in late position. The big blind is short, so he's thinking that he can steal this big blind fairly often. Obviously, there's a chance he really does have a good hand, but there's also a big chunk of hands that he's doing this with that, you know, he's just hoping to win the pot right now. When he just calls, he probably has a better hand than this player in more situations, but he's also not really got the best hands in his range, because if he had aces, kings, queens, you know, a big pair, or, you know, a really good ace, he would probably re-raise here instead of just call the bet. So now I'm going to pull off what's called the squeeze play. So I decide to re-raise to 7 blinds. And the reason this is so effective is because I have an ace in my hand, which makes it a lot less likely for them to have an ace in their hands. And they're both kind of awkward stack sizes to where they don't want to play a big pot. And I raised just enough to scare both of them away. We pick up a nice little pot here. So just for putting in 7 blinds, I win 7.8 blinds. So now we're actually up to just under 1 million chips due to that play there. We're going to fold the jack 5. Okay, so a few hands later, we get the pocket 6s. Now, this guy made another min raise under the gun. And my hand is good enough to see a flop. If I flop a set, like if another 6 comes on the board, I could potentially win his entire stack. Also, if this guy shoves all in and he folds, it's an easy call to try to eliminate this opponent. Instead, what happens is the button squeezes us. So we pulled off the squeeze a few hands ago, but now we're being squeezed in this spot. So this is a really powerful play. We're actually going to have to fold our hands, as is Chippendale here. So good play by Triple OG. I kind of take notice of that to expect him. He might be making more plays like that in the future. We do get the king queen here though. and certainly good enough to raise it up. And Chip thinks about it and calls. Now this flop is, so in poker we think about like the actions that take place pre-flop kind of set your hand in a different range of possible holdings, right? So as the pre-flop raiser, I'm more likely to have cards exactly like the ones I have. King, queen, I'm likely to have like high face value cards like ace and something else. When the big blind just calls, he's more likely to have these types of cards like tens and nines. He's just more likely to have middling or lower cards than I'm gonna have. So understanding this, I decided to check back here just to control the size of the pot. And, you know, I don't want to get check raised off of my hand. My hand can still win at showdown with king high if he completely missed. But on the turn, 5 of spades, he bets 100,000, and I'm just no longer interested to be a part of this hand anymore, so I do fold. I think he could have bluffed us there, but it's still not worth it to speculate. We're going to fold the queen deuce, and it looks like the 8-7 and the jack 5. Okay, we come to this hand. I'm in the small blind, and I decide to raise this guy in the big blind, which, you know, in retrospect, I don't know if it's a great play or not. I'm trying to establish a dynamic with this guy on my left with the way I'm going to play my blinds. If I'm going to raise, I kind of want to see how he reacts. Some players just fold their big blinds very frequently. And if I find out he's a player that does that, then I might decide to steal his big blind more often in the future. Instead, he shoves it in our face with the re-raise. And obvious fold, I now kind of learned my lesson. Okay, our opponent is not going to be pushed around very easily from the big blind. All right, looks like we folded that hand. Okay, so this is just a quick example. The ace-4, it looks like a decent hand because it has an ace, but I folded it because the guy that raised is likely to have a bigger ace, as he actually does here. They play an all-in, hits the jack on the turn, but Professional hits the 2-outer on the river, hits the 6, so he lives to see another day. We will see him again later in the tournament. All right, so we're going to fold the deuce 5 and then pick up pocket 7s. So, as I said before, any pair is pretty good to play pre-flop. I probably should have cut out the thinking time here, but okay, so our opponent to our right does a small raise. We decided just call. I don't really want to play for a re-raise in case he decides to go all in. I don't want to play for that many chips. The big blind also calls and comes along. Now on this flop, this is a very above average flop for our hands. Even though there's an 8 that, you know, if anyone has an 8, they have a larger pair than us. It's pretty unlikely for this player to have an 8 because he raised from early position. And this player could have an 8, but there's all kinds of different hands he could have as well. They both check to us, so when the pre-flop raiser checks on this flop, I'm assuming that he just has high cards, and this guy could really have any 2 cards. Our hand is likely good, and even if it's not, we could potentially hit runner hearts for a flush or a 6 to give us a straight. I decide this is a good time to bet. Bet 2.8 blinds, a little under half the pot. 84,000 into 223. And I expect this to win quite often after the other player folds, and they both fold. So we pick up another one. Back up to 900,000. Very next hand, we're dealt the ace-jack. We're certainly going to play this as well. I decide to open for the minimum raise to 60,000. And if you're not familiar with poker, this whole like BB thing might be a little confusing. But essentially what the BB means is that's the number of big blinds you have, which is a good indicator of about how long you would survive if you'd never played a hand. So I have a different strategy based on the number of big blinds I have. and that's why I'm constantly toggling between the big blind view and the actual chip value view. So this guy decided to shove all in from the small blinds, and we have seen him fold to 3-bets a few times now. He actually seems to be on the tighter side as a player, and he's shoving all in for a pretty large amount. Yeah, he bets 550,000. I've only got 837, and my hand is good, but I just feel like I'm beat here. He's going to show up with ace king, ace queen, or a pocket pair a lot of the time, and even if he has a pair, we're at best coin flipping. I decided to just fold it, wait for a better spot. We get the ace 9 under the gun. I think it could have been opened there, but we just opened and folded to a shove. So I decided to just fold the ace 9. We get pocket 10s here, but I remember this. Everyone just folds, which a little disappointing. I would have liked to see this guy shove all in for his small stack. I would have been more than happy to call it. Jack 7 we fold. Early position raise. When we have Jack 10, we decide to fold this as well. We fold the 6 deuce. We get the queen jack. Another person raises from early. We fold that. I'm going to fold the queen 8. Okay, so finally we get dealt a hand that we can play. Raise this one up to 2 big blinds, which is now worth 70,000 in chips. We have a suited ace. If we get re-raised, we're not super excited about it because, you know, they could very likely have a bigger ace, but we're actually okay to play an all-in against the big blind with a hand like this. He just calls, and now on this flop, we don't connect with a pair, but we have 2 overcards, so if a 7 or ace come on the turn or river, we have a pair larger than what's on the board right now. Obviously, a 5 would give us a straight, and 2 running hearts would give us a flush. So even though we have nothing here, I'm actually happy to put this guy all in, because when we bet his entire stack, he's forced to make a decision for his tournament life. So he's probably going to fold any pair. I want him to fold things like king 9 because I don't want him to hit a king or a 9 on the turn or river. And we could just win the pot right here. So we put him all in. He folds. Pick up another nice little pot here. And we're dealt the ace king. This is one of the best hands you could be dealt at the beginning of a poker hand. So we are more than willing to call any all in that might happen here. All right, and the button makes a min raise to 2 blinds, and the small blind shoves for 5 blinds. So at this point, I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I'm never folding. There's no point in just calling because, you know, we just open the action back up for Chippendale. I'd rather just go all in. Even if Chip calls, we can see all 5 cards and increase the odds that we hit an ace or a king, and we can actually see it. So I do go all in here. And Chip is thinking here, and he calls. So I just wanted to note, he has ace king, and he was thinking about, I mean, it looks like he was thinking about folding. So that just shows how tight he is, which makes me a bit more confident about folding the ace jack to him earlier. But turns out he has the same hand that we have, and the other guy has pocket 6s. So the 6s are actually a huge favorite here. But sorry for him, we both flopped a straight. So we both made the same straight with the ace king queen jack 10. I put the icy emoji in on the board there, and yeah, so we end up splitting this guy's money. He is eliminated. We get the notification that we have now earned $86.35, which you can see down here, and we are in, I think this is not updated yet, but it says we're in 6th of 19 remaining, so we're getting closer and closer to the final table. Once we reach the final 8, that's when we know we will have made the final table. So we're dealt a few junk hands here and fold. Fold the 10-7. Looks like somebody else is eliminated. Down to 16 now. It's folded to us in the small blind, and the big blind is a big stack. We decided to just give this one up. Last time we tried to raise him, it didn't work out, so say, okay, man, you win. Fold the 10 deuce, fold the deuce 3, fold the queen 4, We get a walk with the 4-5. That's fantastic. All right, so this is a crucial hand. I get pocket jacks in the small blind. Pretty exciting to pick up a big pair close to the end of the tournament. It's also a bit nerve-wracking because if we're going to play a big pot, there's a good chance that somebody has a hand like ace-king or maybe even a bigger pair. So we're looking at this situation kind of unfold here. And the cutoff player raises to 2.5 blinds. I've only got 23 total blinds, but I'm definitely willing to play for more. If I shove here, I think he folds all of his best hands, or sorry, all of his worst hands, and he only calls with, you know, very, very good hands. By making a smaller raise, he might actually call with some speculative hands like Queen Jack, King 10, King Jack. You know, a lot of hands that we're in very good shape against. So I do opt for the smaller re-raise to 280,000. And he calls. So this is an interesting situation we find ourselves in. So we're now out of position. There's about as much in the pot as we have left in our chip stack. So it's a 1 SPR or stack to pot ratio. In this situation, you know, you're going to end up just shoving all in a lot of the time. I don't love it here because, you know, his range does include a lot of queens, Queen X hands. He could have like Queen Jack, Queen King. But he does also have a lot of hands that don't contain a queen, like King 10, King Jack, King 9. Could also have like Ace 9 suited, things like this that we're actually in pretty good shape against. So additionally, if he has a draw, like if he has King Jack, for example, or 2 clubs, I don't really want him to see the turn or river for free. So all these things can combine. I do decide to just shove all in here on this flop. He is thinking for quite a while, and he calls with the King 10. So when he calls, we are... Actually, let me back this up just slightly. When he calls, we are an 81% favorite. So the only way he can win the hand is if he catches a king or 10. And it comes ace and a 9. And we're very happy he doesn't have a club in his hand. So that is a huge pot for us. That actually brings us up to almost 2 million. I think that actually made us the chip leader. It should update after this hand. So we fold the 9-5. Big blind gets a walk. And no, okay, so we're in third. There's 2 players over 2 million at this point. We're gonna fold the King 3. We're gonna fold the Deuce 3, the 8-3, the 8 Deuce, 9-5. So we're not getting ahead of ourselves. We're just kind of playing our chip stack and waiting for players to be eliminated. In the span that we just folded about 5 hands, it looks like several people were eliminated. So now we're down to 12. I now have the ace jack suited in the big blind, and the small blind is raising into me. I had seen this player bluff in a previous hand, so I know he's quite aggressive. I'm going to use that to our advantage and understand that he's probably raising with some weaker holdings here. If he has a hand that's willing to continue, though, I still think we have a, you know, we're more than likely have the best hand. So I'd actually decide to re-raise here to 250,000. He calls fairly quickly. We see a 10 high flop. He checks to us. We have the pre-flop betting lead. So I'm going to bet again here. Make him fold his hands like King 8, King Jack, you know, things like that. We don't want him to hit a pair. Their turn is an ace, so we end up turning top pair. And this is kind of an interesting spot. It does also bring the 3rd spade, so I'm a little bit worried he has a flush. Or even 2 pair with aces and 9s, or aces and 4s. These are all hands he could potentially have here. He could also just have like a 1 spade hand, but we're at the point where the pot is about half of our remaining stack, and I don't really want the pot to get much bigger than this. So instead of playing for all my chips, I decided to just check back here. Checking back also opens up the opportunity for him to bluff on this river, because it looks like we're afraid of the turn card, but in reality we actually hit the turn card. So he might try to bluff at this, just knowing he's an aggressive player. He does. So he bets 212,000. We didn't check back the turn to fold. We checked back the turn to call a river bet. So I'm certainly not folding when he bets less than a quarter pot here. Or actually, he bet exactly a quarter pot. And it turns out he did bluff with the king-8 offsuit. So he could have hit a spade on the river. Glad he didn't, and he decided to bluff into us. That brings us up to 2.5 million. And we're going to fold the 8-3. And now we actually are in first place of 12 remaining, as you can see up here. So we're in a great spot. Don't need to get too crazy. We're going to leverage our chip stack, and like if we find the opportunity to, but we can really fold our way to the final table if we wanted to. So we do fold the 8-9, fold the queen 4. Now I get the ace-6 under the gun. Because we're only playing 6-handed, I'm able to open up a bit more hands than usual. With an ace in my hand, I'm blocking everyone at the table from having a good hand. I'm not saying it's impossible, it's just less likely for them to have a hand that contains an ace because I have one of the aces. So I'm going to use that information to raise to 110,000. And our opponent here calls. This is the same aggressive guy that tried to bluff us earlier. He checks to us. I'm definitely going to continuation bet. I have the ace of diamonds in my hand, so if it comes diamond, diamond, I have the best flush. And a lot of the times he just folds to one bet here. So I decided to bet 84,000. Pretty small compared to the size of the pot. He calls fairly quickly. And then he leads for one big blind here. I'm a little bit confused by this bet. Sometimes players make this like blocking-ish bet if they have a draw of some sort. Like maybe he has a 9 with a diamond, so like 2 diamonds with a 9 in his hand, so he has like a straight and a flush draw. Or maybe he picked up a spade draw on the turn, and he doesn't want to call a larger bet. So when he bets minimum here, I think that if he does just have a draw, I'm actually ahead with my ace a lot of the time. So I call, and I river the 6. And now he thinks for a moment and checks. So to me, it kind of feels like he missed his draw. And if that's the case, my 6 is probably good. So I do check back. And it turns out he had king 9, so he didn't have a flush draw. He did have the straight draw that we kind of expected him to make that bet with. And we win with our pair of 6s. Excuse me, a little bit congested. All right, so on to the next hand, we get the jack deuce, we fold it. Ace 7 here. Guy raises under the gun, and our friend lost a big pot after losing a couple to us. And he's all in here. I decided to just fold and let these guys play for his money. My ace was likely dominated there. And I think I included this because it's kind of funny. They check to the end, and then there's a bet and a raise. And then Bill, I think, decides to fold after some deliberation. And it turns out the guy that raised under the gun had aces. And our friend in the small blind actually had 6-4 and flopped a full house. So good for him. He stays alive. Next hand, we pick up the ace-queen suited. Definitely raising this up. This is one of the best hands you can be dealt to start. We get called by the small blind and flop an ace. Now, as you've seen, I usually make this small bet with all of my hands, whether I hit or not. So this makes it hard for us for people to play against us, because I'll make this bet whether I have it or not. In this case, we have it. He calls, and then another ace hits. So he checks to me again, and now in this position, I know I almost certainly have the best hands. And when he just calls, he could have like a 9 or a 7, or maybe even like a straight draw of some type, like 10-8. suited. So instead of scaring him off, I decided to check this back to make it look like we didn't like the turn. So this can induce a bluff from him on the river, or we can bet on the river, and now we're more likely to get called by a hand that contains a 7 or 9. He checks again, and now what I decide to do is make an overbet. So I'm actually going to bet more than the size of the pot because I think that this looks really bluffy. Because after we check back the turn, you know, maybe he thinks we don't have an ace, and now this bet looks like we're like desperately trying to win the pot, and we're hoping to actually get called by a 7 or a 9. In retrospect, I probably could have bet a little bit less to still look bluffy, but I think he either has a 7 or a 9 or a missed straight draw, so might as well target the hands that have a pair. He does end up folding. We win the pot anyways. Now we're up over 3 million, still the chip leader. We're going to fold the 10-7. We do raise it up. Or sorry, we're in the big blind with the 5-6 of hearts. And there's a raise and a call and a re-raise. If he didn't re-raise, I probably would have seen this flop at the very least. But as played, I have to fold. We get the 8-5 and we... Okay, so we limp. The big blind checks. We flop a 5. I decided to bet 1 big blind on the flop. Having any pair is usually good here. We're looking to just take down the pot. Turn is the 6, now a 4 makes a straight. I figure if I bet here and represent that I have a 4, he might fold some of the high card hands that he called the flop with. Plus we can actually get value from like a 3 here sometimes. And then we river 3 of a kind. So now if he had a 7, 6, or 3, our hand is better, but we still lose to a 4. I decided to make a bet here of about 300,000, hoping to basically get called by a 7 or 6, and then understanding that if he raises, he most likely has a straight here, so I can easily fold my hand if he does decide to raise me. But also because the board is paired, he might just call if he has a straight here as well, appearing the full house. He does call very quickly. Turns out he has pocket 4s and made the straight, so we did lose a bit of a decent sized pot there, but that's okay. I think we played it all right. And now we have the ace queen of hearts. I'm going to raise this one up from the button. And both blinds fold. We earn back a little bit of what we bluffed off, or didn't really bluff off, but a little bit of what we lost in the last hand. Now we have the pocket 7s. And let's see what our opponent decides to do. He raises, so it's another spot where I believe I just call. I don't really want to re-raise and get shoved on. I think a re-raise is actually fine there though, because he might fold a lot of his kind of like medium strength hands. When the flop is ace, ace, queen, and he checks, there's like 2 possibilities here. He either smashed this flop with like ace, queen, or pocket aces or pocket queens, and he's checking to try to win more money from us, or he hates this flop and he's just going to fold to any bet. So understanding this dynamic, I decided let's just get the information right now and see if he's still serious about this pot. So I bet 105,000 just to see how he reacts to this bet. If he calls, I'm almost positive he's slow playing me now. So he does call, and I think he's trying to trap us. So I decided to just check back. If he had a straight draw, like the other possibilities, he has like king jack or king 10, but I feel like those hands would also fold to a bet on the flop a lot of the time, or just check check. Now when he bets the river, it kind of feels like his last effort to try to win the pot with an ace, or try to win more money with an ace. And it's just hard for me to imagine a hand that I beat right here, so I do decide to just fold the 7s. All right, we're gonna fold the 10-6. With the ace-10 in the big blinds. Player raises, another one calls. Certainly gonna call this. The flop is queen 3-5. We totally miss in a three-way pot, but I check, and then the pre-flop better. He's gonna continuation bet here for 150,000, I think. And then once the big blind folds, I'm thinking to myself, like, he's gonna make this bet with all of his hands, whether he has a queen or not. It's actually pretty unlikely for him to specifically have a queen here. I don't think he has a 3 or a 5, unless he has pocket 3s or pocket 5s. So just overall, I think to myself that if I raise here, he really can't continue unless he has a set or a queen. It's a very small slice of his potential range. So I do raise it up here to 390,000. This just really puts him to the test. You know, if you got it, you got it. If not, I win the pot. And he folds. We could have been bluffing with the best hand there, but either way, nice little check raise with ace high to win that one. We have the ace deuce here. There's a raise and a re-raise, so we fold. And yeah, so ace king loses to pocket kings. And that brings us to the final table. So now we are, I think, second or third in chips at the final table. Very first hand, we have pocket 7s. And the small blind goes all in. It's an easy call here. He's going to make that all in with a ton of different hands. And we were a coin flip and flop a set. Turns a bit of a sweat, but we hold. And just like that, we have earned ourselves a pay jump and a lot of chips to boot. So now we have locked up $368 from our $11 investment. And we're going to fold to this all in. Okay, so next hand here, we get the ace-7 off and the cutoff raises. So this is another thing that we talked about before. Like, I thought you saw me hover fold right there. So I'm debating between folding or re-raising. Ultimately, I decide to re-raise this guy because I have an ace in my hand. He could just be trying to steal the blinds. And if you look around the table, this guy's only got 400,000. This guy's got 1.3 million. This guy's got 1.4 million. So all these guys are shorter than this player. So realistically, it's his goal to outlive these guys because every pay jump is at least $100, sometimes $200. And I just know that by applying pressure to him, he's going to look around the table and say, wow, I shouldn't go all in here. So he's a lot more likely to play passive in this situation. Plus, I'm on the button, and I block a lot of hands with the ace. So overall, it's a really good spot to 3-bet, and he does fold, which makes it a lot easier to survive deeper in this tournament. Get the ace-9 off the next hand. And I raise it up. And the small blind calls, which now makes it a bit easier for this guy to squeeze. He could also just call a lot of the time here. But he does shove all in. So my hand's good, but I decided it's not good enough to call a shove with. He's shoving for 21 blinds. I have 60 blinds. It's a lot better to preserve my stack here. Turns out the small blind was actually, he was trapping with ace-king and ends up against kings and gets lucky. Hits the ace. We love to see that because now this player's eliminated, which means we ladder up and earn more money. Now we've got $478 locked up. With Jack-8, the guy under the gun goes all in. I fold. Queen-5, I fold. 8-9, I fold. King-3, it's min raised under the gun practically, and Only costs us 1 big blind to win 4.5, so I do call. The flop has completely missed us. Totally okay with just checking and folding here. There's no point really in the big stacks. Us three are all big stacks in the bottom left here. There's really no point in us playing a big pot against each other when these guys are so short. We really just want these guys to lose so that we can earn more dollars. 6-9. Queen 6 is folded. Here, this might be a bit of a boredom raise. I was thinking to myself that, you know, it's easy to apply pressure to this player because he is kind of short. So I do raise with the 9-4 suited. This is the most out of line that I've gotten so far. I thought that I might be able to get away with it, but we immediately get called by the button. And we are re-raised by the small blind. So I decided to get out of their way. They end up playing a decent sized pot against each other. I now get the pocket sixes. And I am definitely okay with calling an all-in from probably either of these players at this point. I might actually fold the sixes to this shove. Yeah, so he re-raises. This looks really strong. So instead of shoving all in, he re-raises to 5.2 blinds. It could be a really crafty bluff, but the other time I've seen this player make a play like this, he showed up with pocket queens. And I just have a feeling he's going to shove the flop a lot. So what I just, instead of going all in and maybe playing for a flip, I just decided to call his bet. And if the flop was low cards, I probably would have continued here, but the flop is ace high. Completely smashes a lot of the hands that he does this with. And then he bets a majority of his stack, so I just fold here. We're going to fold to Jack 9. There is an all-in and a call with the short stack, and the short stack is eliminated. So now we are winning $604. And we have the ace-6 in the big blinds. It is folded to us, so we just win the blinds. Here I have the ace-7 suited. Definitely a good hand to play in the blinds. Like I said before, I don't really want to play a big pot against the other big stacks. So I just call. He checks, and we flop a pair and the nut flush draw. So great flop for us. We really don't care if he calls us with anything. Decided to bet 81,000. He calls. Turn is a 3. I'm still not too worried. He could have a jack or a 10 here. But even if so, we have spades as outs. So I bet 192,000, still applying the pressure to him. I'm okay with this pot getting bigger. I would hate to get raised here, but I think by betting twice, he's unlikely to raise us. Then we river another 7. So at this point, after calling twice, I do kind of feel like he has a jack or a 10. I decide I'm going to try to value bet against that possibility. So I decide to bet 295,000. I think that this bet will get called by a jack or a 10 fairly often. And I think he does end up folding this. Yeah, so he folds. We pick up a nice pot there, back up to 3.2 million now. Get the king 8. I do raise this one up to 160,000. We're short-handed and the pressure's on, so I'm okay with raising on the button. We flop the king high flush draw, so now any diamond will give us the nut flush. And I'm more than happy betting this. I think that, you know, even if we get called by a hand that contains like an ace or a 10, you know, we can always hit our diamonds. So I type in a bet of 127,000. Hoping to just win the pot right here, but it's not the end of the world if he calls. Turn does not help us at all. He checks again, and at this point, I kind of want to realize the equity of my hand, so I decide to check back. Hope to hit a diamond on this river. It is not a diamond. So now we're left with king high. Our opponent checks again, and I thought about bluffing at this, but I don't think our line is very credible. We bet small on the flop, check back the turn, and then we missed. There's no diamond on the river, so I decided to just check back. He does show up with a 10. I think he would have called us if we tried to bluff. So glad that we checked there. Then I just fold the 3-5. Now we're dealt the queen 5, fold that as well. All right, now we're in the big blind with 10-8, and the small blind just calls. We decided to check it back. We flop a 10 and a backdoor heart draw. He bets the minimum. We're certainly not folding for that. We turn both a straight and a flush draw, and we still have a pair of 10s. He bets bigger here, but my hand still has too much value to fold, so I call it. And the river's the queen. And our opponent decides he thinks for a moment and then checks. So this is an interesting spot. There's a chance I already have the best hand, but when he checks, it tells me it's very unlikely that he has a jack or hearts, because if he had the straight or the flush, I think he would have kept betting. So it's actually possible he has like a king or a queen here, and he's checking, hoping to get to showdown. But he's afraid of us having the jack or the hearts. So because just all it takes is a jack to win this pot, I actually decided to turn my hand into a bluff, because checking back, I will lose to a king or a queen, but by betting here, you know, I could probably get a king or a queen to fold. So I bet 441,000, which is almost a third of his stack, and he does fold. So a nice little pickup there. Not sure if we were bluffing with the best hand or if we needed to bluff, but either way, we're putting our opponent in a tough position to continue. So always good to do that. Now we're in the small blind with the 6-7, and the dealer button just calls. I decided to just call as well. This hand flops pretty well. If I flop like a 6 or a 7 or a straight draw, you know, I can often be good. Flop doesn't connect us much at all. I mean, a 9 will give us the low end of the straight, but it's not exactly the best card. If someone had queen jack and we hit a 9, then it's no good. They both check though, and then the turn is a 10, and I'm thinking to myself, like, they could have a 10, but they haven't shown any interest in this pot. And if I bet right here, it really looks like I have a 10. So I decided to bet. I figured that, you know, they would have probably bet a king if they had one on the flop. And we win with 7 high. So sometimes you just got to bet and take it if the opponents showed no interest in winning the pot. And we get pocket 7s here. And our opponent limps for 80,000, and he's been limping a fair amount. I decided to kind of punish this limp with a raise to 280,000, so it's going to be 200,000 more to him to call. I think he might just call this bet a lot, and then I can just win the pot with a bet on the flop. Instead, he shoves all in. So now it's going to cost us 1.2 million to win 1.9 million. It's not my favorite spot in the world, but even if we call and lose, we still have over 2 million chips to work with. And a lot of the time he's doing this with big aces, like ace king, ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, maybe even like ace 5, since he limps first and then shoved. But either way, I do decide to call. And we are in a coin flip against ace 10. So we're just praying that we win the flip. The turn is very sweaty. He can now hit a spade, ace, or 10, but he misses everything. So we eliminate him. We're down to the final 4, and we have over 5 million chips, which is fantastic. We've now locked up $761. And the very next hand, I fold the 7-4. And there's a shove. And a call. So now they're racing Jack 9 against King 7. So the big blind actually made a pretty good call here. He assumed that he was ahead of his range, and he's correct. However, a 9 hits the flop. So now the player that shoved on him has the best hand. He's looking for a king, and he misses. So at this point, we're down to just the 3 of us. We've all locked up just under $1,000. And at this point, I'm looking at the prize pool, and it's like third place gets 996. Second place got like 1,400, and first place got 2,200. So if we were to split it evenly right now, we would each earn more than second place money. So I hit the deal button. We're all pretty even, and poker can be quite random. I mean, I'm confident in my abilities, but if you're ever guaranteed more than second place money with 3 left, I think it's the right move to just go for the deal. So I click the deal button, hold a few hands, and then we're on break. And then after the break, the 2 other guys do click the deal button as well. It pops up this screen, which kind of breaks things down. So this is a ICM calculator. Based on the number of chips that we have, it calculates how much our chip stacks are worth. And we all agree to the deal. So we all chopped it up, and we each earned $1,500 and odd dollars. So definitely happy with this. Pretty cool to make it all the way to the final 3 in such a large event. You know, it's not often that you make it all the way this deep. I've gotten to a lot of final tables recently, but hadn't quite closed one out. So it is nice to just kind of make the deal, and basically it's basically getting first place, first, second, third, whatever. It's all the same when you make the same amount. So very happy with the final result here. Felt like we played pretty good. We also got pretty lucky in a couple spots, but yeah, hopefully this was a little bit insightful to kind of another world that I live in the poker world. If you are a poker player and you have any feedback for the way I played any of the hands, please let me know. Always like to hear other thought processes for, you know, different ways to think about the hands. And yeah, if I make another deep run, maybe I'll just turn on the stream and play it from there, or I'll make another video like this. We'll see what happens, but stay tuned. I got another Halo video in the near future, and you guys enjoy the rest of your night.